welcome back to Galactic Reviews. This is our last episode of the Bad Batch Season 1 review. And in this episode, we will be reviewing episode 15 and 16, as well as the show Season 1 as a whole. So, short synopsis for episode 15. Hunter is getting taken back to Camino by Crosshair, and the rest of the Bad Batch go back to Camino to try to rescue him back, even though they know it's a trap because it's Crosshair. Episode 16 is them trying to escape Camino, to put it mildly, and we will go ahead and go with our ratings for these two episodes, as well as the show in its entirety.
Overall, I think it was a interesting ending, per se. I'll give it an 8 for now. I'll explain why. The season as a whole, I'll give about a 7.5.
For episodes 15 and 16, there was some interesting parts that they did, and I would give them a 7 out of 10 just because they could be explained a little bit better later, and they left you still questioning some things in the last two episodes, but I'd give that for a 7 out of 10 for episodes 15 and 16 for this season. For the season as a whole, I would give it a 5 due to it being a whole lot of filler and not really much of a story arc. And when it was a story arc, it was based on a new character, not on the characters that were already somewhat established that really could have used some interesting character arcs, considering that we only had 4 episodes with them before in Clone Wars and didn't really get much involvement with them there as much as we were hoping to get with them here. We got pretty similar involvement, except with the exception being Hunter and every now and then Wrecker. For now, I'm giving it a 5 out of 10.
For the last two episodes, I would have to give it an 8 out of 10. I personally enjoyed them. There were some things that I thought would happen differently, I think is the best way to put it. So I was a little disappointed in that, but as the show as a whole, I would have to give it a 7 because yes, there were a lot of parts that were just really slow. They didn't really have character development for quite a few of the characters. It was fun to watch, but that was about it. There were parts that in episodes you can just skip.
Let's continue because I'm interested to hear opinions about these last two episodes.
Alright, I'll go on first. I'll just say
All right.
it was great. Don't believe anything Payson says. Just say it like that. Payson thinks it was terrible. He was talking to me last night. He's like, "No, the whole thing's trash. I don't believe any of it. They ruined the whole thing. I'm disappointed in Filoni." That was all he said.
Is that really what he said?
Not verbatim, but
In a
I
nutshell,
meant,
yes, that's pretty much what he said.
I said that as a series as a whole, and I got good reasons. But as a series as a whole, I was fairly upset with it. 15 and 16, I relatively did like. The only parts that I didn't like about it was them stepping on the episode 1 stuff where they were kind of wanting to forgive Crosshair. And I like the whole thing about Crosshair being like, yeah, you decided to leave me there. And granted, they could have saved him technically because he was the only one that was still up. So if they just got Wrecker back on board and then knocked him, they could have gotten him back on. And they really couldn't save him in 8, but they also never went back for him. And this is the same squad that can take out armies.
Yeah,
So
but armies of droids, not clone troopers.
true, but to be fair,
I mean, yes. No, I
clones
know what
are
you're going
just meat
for.
droids.
Yeah, but they have more skill. I don't think that's the right word for that.
They have better training, I'll say that.
Yeah, better training, and
That's
that
bit-
and they view them as brothers. Like they don't have the choice in fighting. They have the inhibitor chips.
That's another thing I have a problem with is and this is more so on it as a whole season. They would say stuff in one episode and then you would never get like an explanation until like 4 episodes later. Or it would take multiple episodes. And it's not just like multiple episodes of content, it's multiple episodes of filler most of the time. Like with Omega saying something to Crosshair. You did get something later on in episode 2 about, hey, he's got an inhibitor chip. And Omega didn't tell him, but also Tech didn't. Apparently, Tech also knew and didn't say anything as well, which I get. Which, I mean, it's Tech.
Isn't
I mean, that's
uncommon.
kind of somewhat expected, but for them not to say anything else about with them having possible problems with their chips until like episode 7 when Rex shows up. That's when I kind of somewhat have a problem with that. And most of those episodes were filler up until episode 7 where they're meeting Rex, going over with how to get their chips out, how it's going to be possible for them to do that. And the only other character development in this show is Omega most of the time with Hunter. And then
I
later
mean,
on in 15 and 16, they ruined that dynamic by saying she's older than them.
which in a way makes sense.
It does to a certain extent, but in all technicality, she's a lot older than we thought she was because she's got to be at least 15. Because if you put them late as G2 clones, that would make them, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to just guesstimate numbers. That would make them like 26, like genetically, but physically they would be like 13, or we could even say 24. We could even push them that late because she would have to have memories of them being made in that lab as well because she remembers it. It's not like she saw an archive footage. She remembers them being made. It's the thing where they put all this stuff and it's kind of confusing. And then when you try to add it all up, it sometimes contradicts. I also don't like how they decided to bring in commandos for one episode when they had all these hints, especially during episode 8 when you get to see the inside of Hunter's helmet and it's just like Republic Commando the game, and you don't get to actually see commandos until episode 14 with them rescuing Gregor. Granted, we get to see how Rex was able to get Gregor, where Gregor was. Doesn't explain how he got rescued after he blew up, but he's there. It would have been more beneficial for them if Rex went, since they've already got Gregor, for Rex to go along with them to rescue Hunter, but they can't bring Rex into this because he's supposed to be unknown to the Empire, which is why nobody's searching for him. Hence why he's in the void and he's not getting any problems whatsoever. Because I believe in this continuity, they're having no clones really defect. They're all going to be euthanized and retired and taken out whenever the time is right, it seems like. But some of them will probably be used to help train more stormtroopers, as can be seen in episode 14. And a thought that happened that Dave Filoni thought for an episode of Rebels with bringing in Commander Cody for an episode of that where Cody and Rex are fighting each other. So, I mean, it's a whole bunch of things where they're trying to put into continuity as well as make it suspenseful, where they're also breaking stuff as well. They're trying to put in a little bit of what is canon, which is the chips, and also what is legends, where they're loyal to the Republic, which became the Empire, and they're loyal to that. So it's just a weird amalgamation of they're trying to make a weird amalgamation of both, and for me, it's not working. Now I don't know if it worked for you, Jack, but especially with
You,
Crosshair, he like I get it. I think they could have done it better, and I think they should have done it better. And it felt somewhat rushed because they don't say when the chip was removed. You don't see the slit that both Rex, Gregor, and Wolf have in the Rebels series. I would think the only one you can actually see it on in the show would be Wrecker because Echo has the metal in the way. Hunter and Tech both have hair in the way of the thing. So I would think the only one you would be able to see it on is Wrecker. And I haven't gone looking to see if you can actually see the scar on the side of his head. If I need to, and if I'm not boring you, I can get into a few more of them, but I think it's your time to speak and correct me on stuff that I might have gotten wrong.
it's not even correcting. It's just a different point of view. So let's go. Let's start with Omega.
Yeah.
Regarding Omega, yes, there wasn't a lot of character development for Tech. Echo, we know pretty well because of the Clone Wars. I mean, yeah. And Omega and Hunter's relationship, I think even though she is older, I think it still works out good for the
Mhm.
simple fact of she's a shut in. She was never allowed to leave the communal facility. She doesn't know how to survive without pearly white hallways and everything.
Okay.
So her relationship and hers feels more of a
Master student.
yeah kind of thing. Even though yes, she's older, I don't think it takes away the fact of she's still learning from him.
I don't think it takes away the fact that she's learning from him. I think it takes away the fact that they were going for that father-daughter dynamic because now it just seems kind of weird in that aspect. Like I get for the whole master and Padawan kind of dynamic, but they're
I
also
mean, well, I mean, there's instances where a master is younger than a Padawan sometimes, and that may be just because one, the Padawan in question who is older wasn't found until later, or the master who's younger one is just that good in the art of the light side, dark side, whatever.
I
Because
mean,
there's
Obi-Wan didn't become a Padawan until very late in age.
and so I mean, there's different ways you can sort of view that. If we go off about the age thing, there's the laptop game Star Wars: The Old Republic, where they have
yeah.
quite a few instances of that,
Okay.
where the younger is teaching the older.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's any more canon though. But I get what you're saying.
Some of it's
Um,
well, a lot of it's legend because of
yeah,
Revan and et cetera, et cetera. But actually, no, it's kind of canon because you got to
I think
include Darth Malgus and all
they
that.
seem to be yeah. Well, they seem to be very picky, choosy about
Yeah,
what is canon and what is not, and that's what makes it very confusing. Because, and especially when they did the whole Ahsoka novel, where they decided to redo it essentially in Clone Wars season 7, and then kind of made it, and they kind of retconned that with Rex still having the chip in season 7, whereas I believe in the book he did not. He already had it out.
I can't say for much of the more recent novels, especially revolving around the Clone Wars, because I'm more of an Old Republic guy.
Another one would be the Doom comic, Caleb Doom, his
Yeah,
whole with him as a Padawan, that kind of problem, which that's what Disney was criticizing Legends for, and then they said they were going to make sure that this did not happen, and it's already happened, and it seems like it might go that similar direction because I think a problem is Omega in general because the Kaminoans do things for a reason, and I understand like having another Boba Fett as a backup, but I'm still trying to wonder why they made her female. And the only thing I can come up with, and I don't want to, and I hope this is definitely not the reason, but the only thing I can come up with is sadly a real world reason where they want a female main in the show. And we thought of an out earlier on with Omega possibly being a high strategist, where she was made to be a high strategist, where she could oversee a battle up in like the Avenger class,
I
freaking
know what
whatever
you
those
mean.
things, and she could oversee the battle and be able to implement things and still keep things relatively in check, which would kind of be make sense that she would be female then because multitasking, you'd be handling multiple fronts at once and multiple teams at once, especially if they were all commandos. That would be an interesting dynamic. But instead, they just made her a knockoff Boba Fett with none of the experience, none of the training. Yeah, it just seemed to me it just seemed weird as to why the Kaminoans did that, and that's the only reason I could come up with as to why they made her female. So I mean,
My
I can't think of anything else
well, my thing
other
with
than other than that.
Omega being a female is hopefully it's not that reason. I can understand why you see
Like
that.
I'm under like I hope it's not that reason either. I'm trying to give this show the benefit of the doubt.
But my thing is, you can tell she's more of a therapist type because she's able to read people. She can tell. Granted, she knew a lot about Crosshair because we found out. Oh, she knew them ever since they were like get big. But with her, I think she's more of a therapist, and most people enjoy more female therapists because they can relate to them on an emotional level.
Okay, but that's not what she
And
was designed for.
but see, that's the thing. We don't know what she says on.
I mean, we kind of do because they kind of hinted at. Correct me if I'm wrong again, but they kind of hinted in a whole bunch of the episodes where the Kaminoans showed up, either in like one or two scenes where they're trying to get Omega back. They go ahead and say that she is an unaltered, except for the female thing, clone of Django. So they kind of already say that much already. And then they also say that she is the next phase after the Django DNA dissolves. That's their next plan. So I'm still thinking that she is the plan B for when the Django Fett DNA dies out. She is the next donor.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember that scene, but it's it's been a long time since I actually watched
Yeah.
episode 1. So I can't really say I
I
remember
can
that scene, but
I believe it was episode 9 when they're going over that whole thing, and she says specifically that she does not want to end up in a test tube. So she knows that she is somewhat of value. However, we already know she's of value. She's an unaltered clone of Django besides the female part. And the only reason why I would think they would make her is for a plan B for when the Django DNA dies, if Django does die, because I would think they would already know the deterioration of the Django DNA relatively early on. And they would suspect that maybe in the case of him dying, we make a clone that we control that is unaltered that we can then use to get more of his DNA. I mean, to me, that's the most logical thing to do.
and
And the
that
reason
makes
why they would make two of them was because Django wanted a son. So you have one
no.
given to Django and then one stays with you.
Well, not only that, if we consider it's just they wanted a replacement Django DNA, it makes sense why they made a woman.
Okay, I don't
Is
follow that.
well, the way I think about it is since yes, if Django's primary DNA is either lost or destroyed or it just becomes useless after a while, it's hard for me to explain. It makes sense in my head, but there's no real way to say it out loud.
I think I know where you're coming from. Also, it could
Because
be they made her female because they're easier to. I don't want to say that because that can be taken the completely wrong way.
Exactly, that's my problem. I'm not trying to make it sound harsh or really wrong, but in a medical stance, it makes sense to make her a female instead of a male.
I'll just say it. They're easier to quote unquote control. And that's,
mhm.
in a way, they're more emotional.
They think more.
Yes.
So instead of making a straight arrow where they only think about one thing, they have a female version that thinks of 20 different paths they could take to get
Mm,
to a certain objective. Instead of like a rule book where the
yeah.
male's just and then done.
Just wants to kill it.
I think I would disagree with you on that. My reasoning would be based on the Commando series that I'm reading, the Commando stuff that I have seen, and the ARC Trooper stuff I have seen from the show mainly, and from what I've seen on YouTube from people reading the old comics. I get what you guys are saying, but the clones were specifically created to be very subjugated and to just be soldiers first and obey orders. So I don't quite get the whole thing that you guys are going with, but I understand what you guys are saying. Now, I understand what you guys are saying now, I think. But that was the whole reason why the clones were created the way they were, was to be very subjugated to the Galactic Republic and then later on the Empire. And then during the Kaminoan arc of Legends,
Well, and
that,
this is where it's getting to a little bit more theory on my end,
okay.
which it could be completely wrong and whatever. But by the time the whole Galactic War would have ended, and by the time Django's DNA would have been basically useless, the
Mhm.
Kaminoans probably thought the war would be over by then
Well,
because they
yeah.
could still just keep reusing the DNA, and they did how many generations of clones? Like 5 or 6. I was saying they still had enough to continue making more generations. That's one thing we never understand with Kaminoans because they could be thinking it's like chess with them. They can be thinking 5 different moves ahead,
Fair.
and we not even be there yet.
I mean, except when they got killed in that one episode. But
Yeah,
that kind of made them
which
stupid.
I love how they took the chief scientist away because that yeah anyway
I mean, they
but
leaves it open ended, but
I think I know why they took the Kaminoan scientist, but
I think I know why too. But and if it's what I think it's for, then I'm gonna even be more upset because that would then be them trying to correct the mistakes they made in episode 9, if I'm correct.
that's kind of
Which makes
where I
me
was going with that.
which makes me then even more mad because they're still trying to correct everything that they did wrong in the sequel trilogy.
But
But
anyway, continue on. Let's go to the whole clone commando thing. Yes, personally, I would love to see a lot more clone commandos.
mhm.
I would have loved to see it. I wish we could see more Scorch and that whole team. But in a sense, I understand why they weren't included as much, other than the few snippets here and there. For the simple fact of clone commandos are kind of hard to come by. So it makes sense why they'd be training the TK troopers on different various occasions or doing high priority missions for the Empire. So you wouldn't be able to see them as often,
Mhm.
at least where Hunter and them are operating from. Now, maybe if we had like them hunting Rex or something for a while, that would be pretty cool. But we don't know that.
I don't think they're going to be hunting Rex. I would have thought they would have been hunting the Bad Batch. And the reasoning for it is they are very much like a commando group as well as an ARC group. They are a weird mix of both in the way that they think for themselves and they treat each other like family. Whereas ARCs tend to think more for themselves and not give a darn about the Republic. Whereas the commandos think more of their are more like family, but they tend to follow the Republic
In the
or whoever trained them, depending on the squad.
yeah, I'm
So
more rebuttal on that, saying the admiral who was having to deal with the Bad Batch never took them seriously until Ryloth.
yeah, and
And after
yeah,
that, he gave Crosshair whatever he needed to go hunt them down.
which took 2 episodes longer than it needed to.
True, but in the sense, I understand why clone commandos weren't going after them because the admiral really didn't care about like a small ragtag group of clones going AWOL.
Yeah, I get that, like from a larger standpoint, but
Yeah, would
you,
have been
but
smarter to
they've
send
also
them.
got
Oh yeah, but
yeah, but you've also got a lot of. They still had enough commandos to just send one squad out. So I mean, I get what you're saying, but they've also got a decent amount of commandos still. Like I know they're limited on it, but they've still got a decent amount of commandos as well as Crosshair, who knows the team in and out, as
and
can be
that's
seen
what.
with the multiple times during this season where he constantly trapped them using tech and his overthinking skills, Hunter and the way he operates, Wrecker being headstrong, and Echo just being there for the ride. Because let's be honest, Echo don't do much. He's
Well, I mean,
essentially there so that way Tech can help. I mean, Echo is there to help for the cut episode. I think that's about the most he does is the cut LaQuaine episode where he helps get them IDs.
true, and
Yeah.
the whole thing with Echo, yeah, I wish I used him a bit better, but I mean, you can't really fault him because of he was a regular clone. Granted, he
Yeah.
was an art trooper.
Yep.
However, he wasn't given special enhancements or anything, and he was trapped in like a freaking tank for what was it? Quite a long time.
I would think
And
at least maybe I would say almost a year and a half
yeah,
to a year at
so
least.
he's still probably trying to figure out how to use his robot by the best of its ability.
Yeah.
Whether that be helping tech or whatever, or playing a drone being sold off for 500 credits.
And I would have
He was
liked
way
there to
more than
be
500 credits. I'll just say
yeah.
it.
But that's what I say about the Clone Commandos. Yes, I would love to see them more, but I mean, I can't really fault them because maybe we'll get a Clone Commando series. Hopefully,
I doubt it, but
I doubt it too, but fingers crossed.
well, yeah, the inhibitor chips in a way that they're kind of trying to go both Legends continuity and inhibitor chips kind of route. Because the
Yes,
whole reason why the inhibitor chips were created was to make it so that way it looked like they were, since they made the clones so humane in Clone Wars, they were. This was like, I believe this is either Dave Filoni's or George Lucas's way of making the clones turn on them without making them lose their humanity. And they're kind of trying to do a mix of both. However, with the inhibitor chips, they kind of show that they wear off with Hauser, and at least I think so with Hauser. However, Rex says deliberately that you can still be mind controlled as long as you have an inhibitor chip. So
I mean, because you could spew any kind of order and it automatically.
that makes me think, why didn't they just give out an order to put them back under control? Because I mean, that would, to me, that would be the most logical thing to do is put them back in put them back on an order, make them back in control, and make sure that this doesn't happen again by either taking them out while they're under an order, or send them to the front lines, or heck,
And
even just make sure that they always have an order each day, every day.
and that's kind of where I'll agree with you on because in certain comics, especially one where Vader is hunting down a Jedi, the Jedi figures out that Vader's surrounded by clones that are just repurposed for the Empire for now,
Yeah.
and he just yells out execute Order 66, and they automatically. Boom.
Well, he
So it seems
also
like anyone can say
yeah.
this order. It's just knowledge of the orders, which
Well,
only lie with Kaminoans and Emperor Palpatine. Because
which
even the clones don't even know it.
which would make more sense as to why the clones get phased out is because if anybody can say the order, then all it takes is somebody who gets the smart idea is higher up and then catches Sidious with a lightsaber and then says execute order 66, and they automatically open fire on the big guy. So
I mean, that was Order
I get
65. It was to turn on Palpatine.
well that well they could use both then, because he would then
That
have a lightsaber in his hand and then order 65. So it's kind of getting in that weird gray where it was that's how the legends and canon was separated, was by chip and no chip, essentially. Before like the sequels came out, that's how it was somewhat separated. But it just seems kind of weird that they're kind of doing this weird thing where they're trying to include a little bit of both, and it's kind of not working. For Crosshair, it's an interesting theory because he says he doesn't have his chip in him. He kills his whole squad, which he's already killed one of the members at the beginning of when he first meets him. When you first meet him, like episode 5, I think, because
yeah,
it took 4 episodes. Yeah, I remember that because we were angry because it took 4 episodes for us to get
it's,
another Crosshair episode again.
Yeah.
So, which I thought that's kind of bogus anyway. If Crosshair is supposed to be the main villain, we're supposed to see his arc as well as the Bad Batch's arc, which I'll be fair with them. They've kept them both relatively linear. So like there is no arc going with any of these mains other than Omega and Hunter, with some of Wrecker, if you want to give him the Uncle Wrecker moments, which I assume Jack, being a lover of Uncle Wrecker, he would. So, but Tech gets no arc, Echo gets no arc, Crosshair gets an arc. You just don't get to see a lot of it. And when you see it, it's phenomenal. But you get to see it very rarely and very few and far between the episode. That's one problem. The other problem is with Crosshair, he says he has the inhibitor chip out, but you see him have headaches all the time. Now, what I have thought of, and Jack, you might remember this, is there's that one. I believe it's during the Thrawn trilogy where there's this one Mon Calamari who is part of the rebellion,
I think I know what you're talking
who
about.
is being controlled by the Empire. Now he can't control it because they took out part of his brain and replaced it with mechanical parts that they can control. So it's kind of like an inhibitor chip, but on drugs. So he goes ahead, and when he figures all this stuff out, he goes ahead and tells Axbar, "Hey, I cannot control myself, so do not trust me." That's when they find out that's where the leak's coming from. That's when they figure out all this stuff for that. That's what I'm thinking they might have done with Crosshair, to where he obeys them whenever they command him to. But on other occasions, he doesn't have to. However, if that's the case, why did he try to do his way instead of doing it the way Rampart wanted? So, I'm throwing my own idea down the toilet because it's an idea that could have been useful, but I just don't know how that would be implemented.
The
So,
way I kind of view the whole Crosshair situation, because I was confused as hell when he said he had his removed, but there's no,
yeah.
like you said, no visible scar other than that burn mark across the
And
side of the head.
I will say that is interesting, but it's too far back to
Well, no,
be
it goes from
the
like here
inhibitor.
to all the way back. It's right as his hairline.
Yeah, but the inhibitor chip is closer to the hairline and more in the hairline and forehead area, if I
Well, I
remember
mean,
that correctly.
Crosshair's head is a little bigger than the others. If you look at it, it looks a little bit bigger, which I may be wrong. I probably am, but
I have no idea. I'm just saying it looked too far to be, just a little bit too far for it to be the inhibitor chip. And if that's the case, then he's been controlled ever since episode 8. And then when he finally got back control, he was looking for the Bad Batch anyway. And he probably would have let them survive during episode 11 and 12 if he was to capture them. He wasn't gonna kill them all.
with my thing with that is I don't think after watching 15, 16, and listening to especially Omega's comments about his personality, because
Mhm,
like we all know now, she was there when they were being created. And then
mhm.
text a few comments about him being so stubborn and one-sided, you can't break his focus once he's focused onto something.
Yeah, which would have been helpful to like see that when what we said
It would have
earlier
been.
in like a previous arc or something where you see them on a mission. That would have been honestly awesome and great, and would have gotten us more introduced to the characters that way. We would have felt more when Crosshair betrayed not of his own free will.
Well, I don't even think it was of his own free will. I think after listening to everyone's comments at the very end, it kind of made me go back to episode 1 and rethink how he treated the situation. Because Crosshair was a orders guy. He always listened to orders to a
Eh,
degree. not by regs, but by people who prove
I
themselves
think he only
Jedi.
listened to orders by Hunter, essentially,
And well,
and
and
people
that's
he
why,
respected. Hence Cody. He
yeah,
kind of, but it wasn't everybody. You had to earn his respect, which I remember that arc correctly. He didn't really respect everybody who decided straight up give him orders because especially when Rex decided to take over after Cody gets injured during the battle, like when he first gets knocked down, he automatically says Hunter's the leader because one, he doesn't know Rex, and two, he doesn't really trust him.
and that's why I'm gonna retort with Anakin because
Mhm.
he listened. Well, Grand, Hunter, and all them had to listen to Anakin, but he was more willing to listen to Anakin and deal with his orders.
Yeah, to a degree. He wasn't 100% trustworthy until he realized Anakin's not like most Jedi. He actually gets in the front lines of battle instead of like most Jedi where they're in the back.
Exactly, and so that's
So,
why it's. I think it's one of those situations. But anyway, continuing on, when Hunter said he killed Caleb Dune, I think Hunter, not Hunter, Crosshair felt a little betrayed by that because most of the time they got their job done the way they were told to, one way or another, whether it was the satisfactory way or the not. And so when
mhm.
Hunter didn't fulfill the order, he kind of felt betrayed. And then when Crosshair had that whole mind trip, everything
Yeah.
electrocuted, he tried to give him an out. They're like,
Mhm.
just come on over here, just join us. And he wanted that trust to be mutual, but Hunter and them bailed out. And I think Crosshair felt honestly betrayed
Yeah.
himself. I think this is a part where it comes two
Well,
different point of views on the same subject.
yeah. Well, I will disagree with you on one point because I don't remember if it's, I believe it's Tech who's, or Ek, I don't remember which one says it, but I believe Tech says in the first episode, or never been bothered by disobeying orders before. Why is it bothering you now? Hinting that it's the chip that's doing this. So the sad part is we don't quite know because one, they didn't set it Crosshair and the rest of them up correctly in order for this reveal to be like shocking. They made it just enough to get by with it. It seems like because I understand like him being betrayed and him being this is the only way, this is the only thing I know for right now. And this is the only thing I'm probably ever gonna know because they're not coming back. And he had nowhere else to go. And then once he put his trust in it, he seems like the guy that once he puts his trust in something, he goes all in. He doesn't like go halfway, he goes all into it. Now you kind of see him starting to lean the other way after the Bad Batch deliberately went to rescue him when the people that so-called valued him fired on him. He's starting to lean that other way, which will be an interesting character arc for him. I just don't think this is a good enough fall to make that character arc work as well as I think they're wanting it to, if that makes sense. And I'm
What?
sorry if I'm rambling, but I liked Crosshair when he was chip infected and it was still somewhat, and it looked like it would wear off.
See, that's one of the things that when he said I haven't had my inhibitor chip for a while, I was extremely confused.
Because in episode 12, I believe, he said arrest the traitors, which is something that Wrecker said when he was under the influence of the chip, and he said they were all traitors. So, I
Well,
mean,
like I said, it's one of those iffy situations. If he didn't have that one singular line, we could blame all this on inhibitor chips and then him, I wouldn't say fighting control,
yeah,
but trying to reconcile with. Because we can see
yeah,
with Howitzer, like you said earlier, for example, it was all for the Empire, all for the Empire. But once he saw that the buddies he fought with on Ryloth were being treated that way, he questioned a lot.
I think the inhibitor chip one is wearing off. I think it's wearing off. At least the completely blindly following orders in accordance with Order 66, where they're completely just blindly following the Chancellor because the Jedi betrayed. So, I mean, to that point, it makes sense. But once the inhibitor chip starts wearing off, why don't they just redo the order, considering that Hauser didn't seem to have his chip removed, Gregor didn't have his chip removed?
Well, I don't think that the order's wearing off. I think it's just gotten to the point where it's subsiding more. I'm not saying wearing
Yeah,
off because if we go to Rebels, for example, as soon as Wolf sees Kanan's a Jedi, he automatically goes for the kill. So I think it's just the order slowly subsiding and their personalities are starting to take back over.
yeah.
But
Well,
that order still lingers in there. Being known, of course, now, not when it was a whole five situation.
if that's the case, then why didn't Rex pull out his blaster as well?
On what?
They thought that the Jedi wanted revenge on them. That's why he pulled out his blaster when he realized that it was a Jedi. Because they thought the Jedi wanted revenge. Hence why both Gregor and Wolf would have pulled out their blasters.
Then we
So
can consider the whole Rex
Whereas
and
Rex and
Ahsoka thing.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like if it is the fact of the inhibitor chip kind of having like a subliminal message for if you see a Jedi shoot, Rex would have still somewhat been under that and would have at least pulled out his blaster and then put it back. Something would have kicked off in his head.
And
But
that's why I say, well, one, I mean, like I said, Rex and Ahsoka left on decent terms. So I think Rex is to the point where he's not as on edge as the other two, because one, Rex didn't complete his order, like he said, and two, yeah, Gregor's kind of a nutcase, so it's kind of hard to explain him. He's kind of psycho. But
well,
three, we don't know what happened to Wolf and his Jedi.
yeah, well, also
Wolf
that
could have
we don't even
executed
know.
his, and then
Well, no, he says Wolf, Gregor, and I didn't execute the order. I believe that's what he said. I could be completely wrong, but I believe he said that Wolf, Gregor, and I didn't execute the order, or something along those lines.
well, then you could honestly consider Wolf as just having PTSD from hell or
His
paranoia
Jedi was
at
in the
that.
his Jedi was in the middle of everything, like everything
Exactly.
bad.
So he could be paranoid as hell that a Jedi is going to magically randomly appear and
Yeah,
cut him down.
which is what I'm saying is that his whole reasoning for him pulling out his blaster was him thinking the Jedi wanted revenge on clones, and they found out these are where some clones are. Let's go ahead and take out a few, get one information, pry it out of one of them, and then go look for some more. Because I mean, if they're on a revenge path, they're not going to stop at like 3. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, it's Sith. Yeah.
It's just a weird culmination of them pulling in Legends material and then trying to make it canon, whereas it's not quite working. If it makes sense.
No, I understand where you're coming from.
And quite honestly, I would love it to. But this is the part where you've got to pick one side or the other because they're both going to clash. Because this was deliberately created so that way the clones that everybody loves could turn bad. And then you realize it's not their choice. Whereas in Legends continuity, they were just following orders and they only followed orders from the top. And when it came down to it, they're still soldiers.
I think this is where I agree more with canon. There's this interesting little short that sort of theorizes what happened when Order 66 was in place.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, where it's a fan made one and where it's changing
Yeah,
all their memories and stuff. I've
yeah.
seen that. I don't think that's canon, but it's interesting that that would be what goes on in their mind. However,
I wonder if that is what happens because, especially with
nobody
Fives
knows.
and Tough's reactions especially when Tough malfunctions, it kind of looks like that's what happened.
I will say when Tup does it, he looks way more under mind control than
Exactly.
Rex and Jesse.
But I don't know. I really don't know. I will admit the whole inhibitor chip continuity in Bad Batch is kind of iffy.
And I think that's my main problem. That and the Omega thing.
I can understand that feeling.
I would like to have seen more of the Bad Batch. Or if they wanted to, they could have called it the Rise of the Empire, where you're getting to see a whole bunch of different things all throughout the galaxy. I think the best episode we ever got was 1, and then it just went down to mostly just filler episodes. And that's my main problem, is that it was mostly filler episodes where there could have been decent arcs for characters.
I understand that feeling. I guess it's just different points of view on that because I
Yeah,
kind of yes, there was a lot of filler and it kind of got annoying at a point. But a lot of it I found fun, especially when they did little Easter eggs or
yeah.
special appearances like Cad Bane and all that. I kind of enjoyed that, honestly.
It's just one of those things where we're probably gonna just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your way, honestly. It's
I can
just
see your way too, because I
preference.
like I like all the references, I like all the Easter eggs, but when it boils down to it, this is not why I watch a show called The Bad Batch. And the reason why I rate it so high is because it did still pay service to the fans in a way. You got to see Rex, you got to see Kara, you got to see Caleb, you got to see all kinds of different characters throughout the galaxy. It's been forever since I watched Rebels, mainly because I don't really want to go back and watch that. I mean, there are probably some good episodes that I can go back and watch specifically. There's a whole bunch of, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch
no,
of,
there's a lot of filler. I understand.
I don't know if I'd say there's more in that show than this one, but I would say they're relatively comparable.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching this final episode of The Bad Batch. So tune in next time on Galactic Reviews for who knows what.